And like most of you, some of you have questions that, what is grad school? How can I pay for it? So there are different questions that I also want to, investigate and learn with all of you what this process of applying, going into grad school, and even graduating. So I am here and I am joined by Daniel and Netty. So Daniel and Netty, why don't you introduce yourself? Please give us your name, your pronouns, what you studied, what school did you went to get your graduate degree, and a fun fact about you. I know that's a lot of items, but I know a lot of you want to know who our two panelists are. So why don't you take it away, Nettie?
Hi, thanks, Jose. And thank you all so much for inviting me to be a part of this program today. I do believe I was communicating with Tisha originally where I was like, sure, I'll come talk about grad school, but it was really intense and really scary, and not always the most welcoming. But I'll get into that a little later when we chat more stuff. My name's Nettie. My pronouns are they, them, theirs, and I'm associate director for GITA, Gender Institute for Teaching and Advocacy. And I went to San Diego State University, and I got my degree in women and gender studies from the very first women's studies program in the nation. It was a huge honor to be able to study at that program. And is that what I was supposed to say? Oh, cool. Fun fact, I am a total nerd. I think a lot of people know that about me. I love all things horror movies and pretty much all FPS games, first person shooter games. I'm a huge online video game nerd. And yeah, thanks again for having me.
Thank you. How about you, Daniel?
Hey, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to speak about my experiences. I'm Daniel Reichwein. I use he, him pronouns. I am also about to graduate like Jose in May with a Master of Social Work degree from Metro. A fun fact about me, I guess kind of keeping the gaming theme. I'm also really into PC games. I play a lot of NBA 2K strategy games and Rocket League.
Oh, I'm pretty sure I can beat you and Nettie at all these games because I love video games and I can say I'm a pro at it.
Oh,
But
I believe we've had this debate before,
we
Jose.
had this debate before. But you know, thank you for so much for coming in and talking to us about graduate school. And I broke this section down into three portions. The first one we're going to talk about, the process before grad school. What is it like? And after we talk about the before process of getting into graduate school, I want to talk about your experience in graduate school. How was that? And lastly, we're going to talk about, what comes after graduation. And Daniel, you may not. I know you're barely graduating with your master's this year, so uh, maybe we want to, hear your thoughts on future plans. What do you want to accomplish? So, but before we get into that, let's talk about, getting to grad school. So I know the GRE is, it could be a requirement. Now it's something that is still being debated in some universities, but the GRE is required by some graduate programs. Um, Daniel, did you take the GRE and how did you do?
For my program, I did not have to take the GRE. Um, I don't think it's very common amongst social work programs. So I really can't comment too much on that experience. More of the application for this program was based around um, like a writing sample, a sample research paper, and then your transcripts and motivations for wanting to pursue this kind of field.
I had a little bit of a similar experience in that I was required to take the GRE. I took it twice, I believe, before submitting my application. But the graduate program that I was applying to did not place a lot of weight into the GRE around its decision making. In fact, they sort of were really vocal about it being a little bit of an obligatory thing because it was required by the larger university. Um, yeah, I didn't take the G I mean, I took the GRE pretty seriously, actually. I spent a long time studying for it, and I took it 2 separate times, but I was happy that, I have never, even to this day, been a good test taker. I had to take the SAT 3 different times to get my score above 1,000. It was a huge barrier for me, so I was really grateful when I was told by the chair of my department that they didn't place very much weight into the GRE. But similar to Daniel, I did have to submit a writing sample and some of those things.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, one of the questions that I have about the GRE is, uh, do you have any tips for students who will be taking the GRE?
I think that the only tip that I can offer, and I'm not sure, Daniel, if you have something to add, but the tip that I can offer is to get started early. I did not get started early. I was very pressed for time. I waited until, very, very close to the end of the application deadline. I would have probably taken it a third time if I had the opportunity and the timeline to be able to do so. So that's the one thing that I would say. And there's access to a lot of different things that are you know, there to sort of help someone in the process. You can take a GRE prep course, right? But those courses are not always the most affordable, and not always the most accessible to folks. So that's kind of the one tip that I would take, that I would kind of give is just to get started as early as possible, and maybe even find yourself a study group.
Yeah, for me, even though I didn't have to take the GRE for this program, at one point I was thinking about law school and I did prepare for the LSAT. But I'd say like some good general advice for any graduate program is probably start preparing about a year ahead of time, to research, what the requirements are going to be, if you need to study for these standardized exams, making sure it's a good fit for you. So give yourself plenty of time because it is a significant commitment of time, work, and cost.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I know that, sometimes, and I see Sarah's question, how do we know if, we have to take the GRE? Uh, I myself have been looking at different programs, and uh, it says right there, GRE is required, but not, or GRE is not required, but preferable to have. And as Netty mentioned, the program you're applying is going to list it in the requirements section. Um, and GRE is actually, it's I would say is the 5%, 25% of the requirements that you need to turn in into grad school, or to apply to grad school. So I know there are other requirements, like research paper or an example for research paper, a CV, cover letter. Uh, did you have to submit anything like that, Daniel?
Yeah, all of those things. I think so. You had to do a resume. You had to do an essay, application essay. I had to submit a research paper sample. In any graduate program, being able to write well and for academic reasons is really important. All your transcripts from previous schooling, recommendation letters, and then the application itself is usually pretty extensive. So, like I said before, you want to give yourself plenty of time to make sure you do everything that's required and do it well.
How about you, Nettie?
I was just going to say, to piggyback off what Daniel said, like I think in terms of timeline, may or may not be a question that you have for us, Jose. So I might be jumping the gun, but I agree. Giving yourself enough, more than enough time is really important. I would recommend strongly that folks get started over the summer, like June or July, with the actual process of gathering your materials, and getting started on your statement of purpose, which I think might be kind of, for me, it was one of the biggest barriers to applying to grad school. Is you're given a very, very short list of, your, I think it's like 1,000 characters or 1,000 words, right, to essentially be able to profess your eligibility to this program. But yeah, I agree. I think getting started as early as possible, is great. I did not do that, which is why I'm recommending that you all do that, who are thinking about grad school. I think I got started with my application in the fall, and typically applications are due usually the end of October, and through December or some sort of timeline around there. And I got started pretty late in the process, so it was rushed, not unlike what my life feels like these days. So that's like one thing I would recommend is take your time.
I don't know if Netty's reading my mind, but that was actually going to be my next question regarding the purpose letter. I know that's something that I've been researching, and it's something that is scaring me a little bit. I don't know why this is scaring me more than the research part of it, but you briefly touched on it, Netty. Are there any other reasons why this was, or what is a purpose statement, and why is it difficult to compose and to
Yeah.
create?
Before I answer that, though, I want to just say one more thing about the GRE, which I think, Jose, you mentioned this before, that there's a little bit of debate, right, around the GRE and standardized testing, right? I think there's a larger, broader conversation happening about that. And I was really grateful to be able to attend a program where, the folks who ran the program, they were firm in their belief that standardized testing creates exclusivity. And they were, really kind of committed to inclusion. And so I want to just say that if the GRE is scary, it can be a very scary thing, and just trust that it's only one small piece of a larger application that is who you are, and that many, many programs are beginning to have conversations about standardized testing as requirements. So that's just the last thing I will say, is that I know that it could be scary, and it almost deterred me from applying to grad school altogether, because I had done not well on my SATs, so I was very afraid. But about the statement of purpose, so this is like, you may or may not have to submit a research, writing sample, but other than that, right, your university that you're applying to is going to have a lot of your logistical stuff, your transcripts, your GRE scores, right? Like all these things that are sort of required. Your statement of purpose is the one relational piece. It's like that one ability or that one opportunity that you have to be able to share with the hiring committee or the search, or whatever they're called, the acceptance review committee. It's kind of your one chance to sort of relay to them in your own words who you are and what is unique about you and what you will bring to the table as a graduate student in that program. And so the reason why I think it could be a little bit intimidating is because it does have a list of requirements. I think it's typically about 500 to 1,000 words or one page, right? It should typically not go longer than a page. And it's like, how do you encapsulate like all of who you are and all of who you in your complexity, and your desires and your research interests and all of that kind of into one statement. So that's what I mean, I have other things that I could say about kind of timeline and process for creating one, but I'll defer to Daniel, because I've been rambling a little.
No, I think that's good guidance, Netty. Um, yeah, like Netty said, the letter is really your application letter is really the only thing that's more relational. Um, So I guess some tips for that would be, don't waste that opportunity reiterating things that are in your other application materials, like what you studied and your grades and previous experiences. I would use that space to more show the people who are going to be reviewing your application who you are as a person. You can get into your motivations for wanting to pursue a particular graduate program, and really just differentiate yourself from the other applicants.
Awesome. Thank you, Daniel and Nettie. And I think it's really important to, as Nettie mentioned, to the GRE is just part of a bigger picture, and that's what I kept forgetting when I was studying for the GRE. I was like, no, I need to get this test score. No, I need to get the best result. But I think overall it's an experience that you just need to compose, and this is one thing. There are several items that I need to turn in that I can show who I am. Uh, but before I get into getting into graduate school, as a first generation, or coming from a different background, what was the hardest part about applying to uh, your program, your graduate program?
Well, Sarah put a good question in the chat. I wanted to address that first. So she wrote, would overcoming addiction be a good selling point to put in your essay? I would say any unique experience that speaks to your personal strengths is something you should consider putting in your letter. For me, I'm a first generation student. I was separated from my parents and went into foster care when I was a kid because they were incarcerated. I've overcome chronic homelessness, a lot of trauma and poverty in my life. So you don't want to go into too many details, about your personal experiences, but there's a lot of value in having lived experience with those challenges. So I think that is things you should bring up in your letter. But in terms of being a first generation student, it's definitely a lot of challenge, and it didn't just start in trying to apply to graduate school. Neither my foster family nor my adoptive family, neither of my parents went to college, and only one of them finished high school. So when I was trying to navigate the education system, I pretty much had to do it all on my own. So, if you have that experience, or you don't have a whole lot of people in your family circle who can give you some wisdom and guidance on taking this next step in your education, I would try to be proactive about seeking out people who can provide that. I was fortunate to have a few really good teachers from high school, undergraduate, who could help me in the process. So that's my take on it.
How about you, Nettie?
Yeah, I realized, so at first I took a couple of years off after I graduated college, before I went to grad school. I'm really grateful that I did that because it gave me some opportunity to kind of experience the world a little bit and ask myself, like, what is it that I want to do, really, right? And so, but by the time I got to the point where I was applying for grad school, however, I didn't have a whole lot of support, and I realized that I was not prepared, actually. I was really unprepared for graduate school, and I was unprepared for the application process. Um, I also went through a lot of trauma as well, growing up, and um, my as a first generation student, My folks were, Spanish speaking, and my dad had, a 10th grade education level. My mom graduated from 6th grade. All of her siblings, very similar. And so, it was a very lonely experience, and I didn't have a lot of people to sit down with me and be like, this is how you apply to grad school and this is how you thrive in grad school, which is why programs like this are so critical. I really, I by the time I got to graduate school, my connections with Trio, my connections with Upward Bound, some of the undergraduate support connections that I had made in Santa Barbara, um, weren't there anymore. And part of that is because I am also, this is maybe just a little bit of team TMI, but it's important to note that I was assaulted in grad school, or in undergrad. As an undergraduate, I was a survivor, and so I had a very painful and dark last 2 years of college. In fact, it was very lonely, and so by the time I left, I left Santa Barbara and I did not want to look back. You know what I mean? Like, I did not want to be there. I didn't want to think about it. I had sort of very intentionally, my friendships and my professional kind of support networks fell through. The person who caused harm was in a professional role, so there was a lot of trauma going on there for me, and so I left, and I never looked back. And so by the time I got to a point where I felt ready to apply for grad school, like I didn't know where to start, And so I I just want to echo Daniel's comment about having some folks in his corner. I think this is so critical. And I know that folks like Tisha and Sam and other admins who are doing this work are there for you regardless of whether you're still a student, right? And so I strongly recommend definitely having some folks in your corner who can kind of assist you along the way, because I definitely felt grossly unprepared to apply. And then when I got to graduate school, it was a very scary experience to be in a classroom as a first gen, a queer, a non-binary person of color, who, no one in their whole family had attended college, let alone graduate school, and to be sitting in a classroom with 15 other incoming first years who had capstones and had graduated with honors, and just like knew what they were studying. They knew what qualitative data was, what quantitative data was. They knew about their research methods, and all of this stuff that, like, for me, I got there and I was like, what the hell is a research method? I don't even know what that is. So, it was a little bit of a scary time, and so, yeah, I'm going to stop rambling now, but all that to say, having some folks in your corner who can help you is so critical. It is so critical. And yeah, that's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Netty, and thank you, Daniel, for sharing, that there are difficulties that sometimes come up in life, and, you know, uh, grad school is just a big step, and, coming from different backgrounds and coming into a program where, it could be difficult to get into, or, uh, some of these steps that you may not be prepared for, suddenly, you start doubting yourself, and uh, this imposter syndrome hits, and you're just like, am I ready for grad school? Um, and I'm gonna move on to the next part, talking about, in graduate school, because I feel like that's where the imposter syndrome hits the most, and all these different elements of doubting come into play. And I do see we have a couple of questions, and I'll get back to those at the end of the session, or if I see time, we can fit those in. But my next question is, how was the diversity in your program? uh were there more people, with different backgrounds, or did you feel out of place? How about you, Daniel? Let's start with you.
Yeah, that's a good question. I definitely felt out of place. For those who aren't familiar, social work um, tends to be, at least in this area, it tends to be dominated by white women. So, with my identities, I definitely felt out of place. Um, Usually in the classroom, most classes I've been the only male identifying person in the room. I've been the only Pacific Islander. Um, and there's just a lot of different identities that make you feel like you're alone. But um, I'd say, and I didn't start practicing this at first when I was in these classrooms with people who weren't like me. But if you can, when you're in those situations, and it doesn't even have to be a classroom, but if you're in those situations where you're feeling kind of left out from the group, I would recommend trying to find the commonalities that you have with those people instead. And um, I'm glad that everybody that I've been in this program with has also had strong passions for things that are part of my core, for things like fighting social injustice, helping people who kind of get left behind by the broader, economic society. So yeah, I did feel kind of left out, but there's ways where you can connect with people who share your identities, and if you're in those situations, look for the common ground that you have with people.
Yes, I think finding that common ground really does help, and having similarities, uh, helps you create friendships. And I want to hear more about Netty. How about you, Netty?
Yeah. Well, I mentioned just a few minutes ago, right? Kind of that feeling of being in the classroom with just not knowing really, like what you were doing, and I think that is a bit of imposter syndrome, right? Where you're sitting in a classroom setting and you're assuming that you know less than everyone else, when in reality, that's how imposter syndrome works, right? You sort of it's a intrusive thoughts that exist, in reality, probably everyone in that classroom is thinking something similar. And I agree with Daniel, right? Like finding across, like, maybe your incoming cohort, being able to find a commonality with a couple folks, and maybe it's just one person, or maybe it's two or three people in your program that you find a common thread, right? That you can kind of all identify. I think that's really important. I went to a graduate program where, I was one of three students of color in my incoming cohort. Everyone else was white, and almost everyone in the faculty was white. So, it was a and I also, Spanish was my first language, and so that was another thing too that felt like a barrier to me was, I didn't know how to speak as eloquently, right, as other people, and it was, pretty scary. But yeah, I think just finding that kind of common thread, I think, is so important. There used to be actually a bar on our campus. All of our classes were 7 to 10 p.m. And so we would we would meet at the bar at 6 for just a little, just a little cocktail before graduate class, just to kind of loosen up our fear and our anxiety, of going into a 3-hour course. And it was kind of in those moments when I made the strongest connections with some of my peers. I will say though that, there were like three folks of color. There was, some other sort of different identities in my incoming cohort. And I think by the end of the first year, it was just me and one other person who had stuck around. So, there is an issue, right, in higher education and academia, which is the issue of retention. And I saw very firsthand that some of my peers didn't weren't able to finish out the program with me. So yeah. I see that there have been a lot of questions that have come through the chat. Jose, I'm not sure if it makes sense to sort of field some of them now or at the end.
Oh yeah, I think we could fill some of those out right now. Um, let's see. Uh, I know the person on iPhone, her name or their name is Anna. Anna asked, "What were you unprepared for? Uh, what is the weight of the work and or the application, and then the commitment?"
I wasn't prepared for all of it, so I'll just divert. I'll send it over to Daniel.
Um, I'd say the thing that I didn't prepare for the most was probably the time commitment that it was going to take for the MSW program. When you're attending full time, um, you also have to do a practicum or internship as part of your degree. And in my second year of the program, that's a 3 day or sometimes about a 30-hour a week commitment that 99% of students aren't being compensated for. So then I also have to work to earn money to pay bills. So that's another 20 plus hours a week. So already, I'm in school full time. I'm working or doing my internship 50 hours a week. And then I need time to study and prepare for things and write papers. So I'd say that the biggest thing I wasn't prepared for is just the time commitment. So um, I would advise like trying to get in touch with alum of the program and trying to get a realistic expectation of what that's going to be like for whatever program you're interested in. So that's it for me. This is a time commitment.
How about you, Nettie? What was something you were not prepared for?
I was definitely not. I think of all the things listed in Anna's question, um, I think that I was most unprepared for the weight of the work and the commitment, the time commitment. It's no joke, y'all. I sometimes joke about how I lost 3 years of my life in grad school. That's what I was doing. I was working and going to grad school. That's all I did. And the truth is that that's not inaccurate. It is a pretty big time commitment, but it's not insurmountable, especially if you have other things going on in your life, like family and kids and jobs. But yeah.
And I see that we have Alan asking, for the interview process. What is it like, and what kind of questions are asked? Uh, did both of you, have to go through an interview process, um, was was it just like, here's the letter, you're into the program?
For me, I didn't have to do an interview for the application. Um, so I'll defer to Nettie.
Same. I did not get an interview. Turns out the
Interesting.
humanities are cooler. I'm just kidding.
And I do see that we have Daniel Brooks. Daniel, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Jose. I kind of spoke earlier on some notions that I have, and of course, this is for Daniel and Nettie, some notions that I had about before I started this internship. Oh, this program's only for the top like 0.002% of students, and this and that and the other, which um, to my, you know, kind of shock, those are being dismantled the more I talk to people, which is a good thing, actually. So if you could speak a little bit on things, how you perceive them before you enrolled or before, I know, Nettie, you were like, I waited to the last minute and all this. If you could speak of on a little bit on how the notions were different, or maybe some things were the same as what you expected, and then just briefly, kind of a second part. I know, Daniel, you had mentioned you'd done an internship too. I plan on doing an internship, something in the field, that I want to study for grad school. how do you break up, because I'm finding this now, to break up my day when I'm like going from work to internship to study and it's all the same stuff. It's easier to get burnout than if you know you're working a job doing XYZ and you're studying ABC. So if you, I don't know if you had, you know, positions in what you studied at that time, if you could just speak a little bit on how you broke it up, or kind of how you're still here and not have thrown yourself off a bridge, you know.
I can take up the second question from Daniel. So you definitely feel the burnout, you know, and it varies. In the first year of the program, we only had to do 2 days a week for the internship, so things were a bit more manageable. But I think you've got to, like I was talking about before, you have to have some strong motivations and passions for pursuing the program that you're looking into. So when I find myself getting tired, you know, I'll try to reflect on those motivations and what the ultimate goal is. And that's definitely not always easy. And then it's helpful just to have some good supports in your life for when you're getting overwhelmed, you know, people you can talk to, people who can take a little bit off of your plate. One actually good idea from a professor was to form study groups with your fellow students and like split up the readings for a week, and then everybody just put their notes together. That way you don't have to do all the work by yourself. So that was a really good tip. But in terms of managing like the day to day, I have found that it's very helpful to have a lot of organization and structure to your routines. I have a set day of the week where I do all of my Zoom classes, and then 5 days a week I'm working or at my internship, and then you have to give yourself one day off, I say. So Monday's usually my day off, so I try to save that just to recharge for the week. And it's also helpful that we have, you know, academic breaks. But it is a lot of work. So just keep your long-term goals in mind and your passions for pursuing the program.
Daniel, can you please restate that first part of your question?
Yeah, of course, Netty. So I had briefly mentioned that, you know, at first, before I talked to some of these folks that I'm working with at my internship, I always thought graduate school or a PhD was something so unreachable to me, just because it only took like the top 0.005% of people, that kind of thing, which now I know isn't the facts, isn't the truth for a lot of it. Can you just talk a little bit on things, how you, I guess, your conceived notions before you started, and then during, and then maybe after, how they changed, or it was similar, or what was a complete shock to you that you didn't expect, I guess?
Yeah, I do think that there is this narrative out there, right? That graduate school is for the best of the best, for the top of the top. And there are some graduate programs that are, you know, have a reputation for being like super competitive, right? Highly, highly competitive. And that's probably true on some level. And also on another level, I was accepted into grad school. You know, this mostly average student who spent most of their undergraduate career afraid on campus. And I felt super grateful. And when I got there, I realized that even though I was sitting next to someone who had graduated in honors, and even though it was super intimidating, like after some time, there was a realization that we were all just as petrified of attending grad school as everyone else was, regardless of our GPA or regardless of our narratives or perceptions of graduate school. I will tell you though, Daniel, that that perception of grad school deterred me from applying to many programs. If I had known what I know now, I would have applied to many more programs than I actually did. But I was just like, there's no way this program's going to take someone like me. There isn't, I didn't graduate top of my class, XYZ. And so that's a tip for everyone here. If you're feeling intimidated by applying to a graduate program because of its reputation for being competitive, like kick that intrusive thought out the door and apply. Even if you don't get in, the practice of applying is unbelievable. And you never know, right? You never know. So that I hope that was helpful in answering your question.
Yeah, it was. I'm glad you said that because, like I said, the more I'm exposing myself to people that have done it, the more I'm like, okay, that's just my inner saboteur, and she's real loud in my head all the time, So thank you for that.
Oh, I think I know her very well. I think we probably all know her. Probably even gave her a name too.
Her name's Jill, by the way.
Thank you, Daniel Brooks, for asking those important questions, and that also ties along to a next question. And I do see we have more questions, and I'll get back to those at the end of the presentation or the panel. But one question sticks out to me the most. You know, we're all intrigued about grad school, and sometimes we don't think about the cost or you know of the program itself, or how much the whole program costs. So my next question is, how were you able to pay for your grad program, or are there any other opportunities that can help you, you know, pay for that?
That's a good question. So if people haven't started doing research on this, I'll tell you up front that the opportunities for financial aid that is not loans is very rare when it comes to graduate school. Um, there's very few grants out there. And most people end up using student loans to pay for their graduate school. But that doesn't mean that there's not other opportunities out there. Like, for example, for me, I was able to get almost $20,000 in scholarships, which covered about half the cost of my program, from applying to 2 scholarships through Metro, through the social work department, and then another one for military veterans. So there are opportunities out there. They're not as common as undergraduate. So you just have to look around. And I know that when you're a graduate school, people tend to have some work experience, and there's some employers that will help you pay for your schooling, or there's different employment-based programs that can help you pay for your loans after you graduate.
Nice. How about you,
Yeah.
Nettie?
I was going to say I agree, right? There is there isn't as much funding available for graduate school as there is for undergrad, but there are scholarships out there, and there are programs out there. The FAFSA works the same way for graduate students as it does for undergrad. So it's typically awarded on a first come, first serve basis. So I would strongly recommend for you to apply for your FAFSA the day that it rolls out, regardless of whether or not you've submitted your applications or in the process of submitting your applications, or maybe some pieces are still outstanding. Just do it anyway. I think it will be very helpful. I was given a teaching assistantship. So that's one option that many graduate programs offer, the ability to teach classes while you're in grad school to supplement part of your tuition. However, I have some mixed feelings about that. They kind of throw graduate students into teaching, and there isn't a lot of support or infrastructure for training. And it isn't very highly paid either. I think it was like a fairly small percentage of my overall tuition. So I did end up taking out quite a bit of loans. Through my job here at MSU Denver, though, I'm now in the public loan service program, which hopefully, if it still exists, sometime down the line. It's a program that will alleviate your student loans if you work for a government or education job for full time. But yeah, the options are limited, but they are out there. And so I know that the C2 Hub, and I know that Gita has a whole scholarship team, and there's other opportunities for scholarship support on this campus. Schedule an appointment, have someone help you dig into those deadlines with you.
Thank you. I think all these requirements, and then on top of, how am I going to pay for grad school, just gets you thinking. Uh, and something else that gets you thinking is I know most grad programs, their deadlines, as Netty mentioned, are from October through December, and December is like the last month to submit any documents. You know, would you encourage students to go immediately into grad school, or do you think they should wait a year or two?
Well, my personal view on it is I think it's helpful to get some, life and work experience before you commit to pursuing graduate school, just because it's a very significant amount of time, work, and cost. And like we were just talking about, most people have to pay for their graduate education with loans. So if you end up choosing a program and it's not really a good long-term fit for you, or you can't get the type of job opportunities that you want when you graduate, then it's not as an efficient way of investing your time and money. So I think it's helpful too, but I've also seen a few people in my graduate program who went right into it after their undergraduate, and they are blessed to know their passions very early in life and know the path that they're supposed to be on. For me, it took some time and hard knocks to figure all that out. So just follow your passions.
I agree with Daniel. I took 2 years off between undergrad and graduate, and I was extremely grateful for having done that. I also know folks who were in my graduate program who went immediately after undergrad, and they knew that that was the program that they wanted to be in. And so I would say follow your gut. There's, there's a big debate out there around, do you go to grad school right after school or do you take time off? And sometimes there's this sort of idea that maybe if you take time off, you'll sort of not want to go back, but the truth is that's not true. Like spending a couple years figuring out what your passions are, I think are can be really important. I had no idea that I wanted to study what I wanted to study when I was an undergrad. It took a few years for me to figure that out. Yeah, so it's hard to do that for some science-based graduate programs because some classes, expire. Absolutely. And I would say that if you're a science student as an undergrad, like I would put you in the category of someone who's like fairly well, or you have an idea, somewhat of an idea of what maybe you would like to do, in your career path. Going into the sciences. I was a English lit major, Chicano studies double major, and I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do with my life. So that time was helpful for me.
Sorry, I was having some technical difficulties with my Zoom. Uh, Out of nowhere, the Zoom theme started playing. Um, but other than that, we do have two more questions, and we have 6 more minutes. Um, but the next question is, what is something that you wish someone had prepared you for, but that no one did? Or what is some advice you were never given that you wish someone had shared with you?
I need a moment to think about my answer for that one.
I also I want to be really mindful that we have 5 minutes left. And there is a question in here that I just want to answer, if that's okay. Um,
Go for
okay,
it, Eddie.
which is Sarah asked, no, Sam asked, grad school sounds so overwhelming. Why was it worth it for you both?
Oh, that's actually that was gonna be my last question.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. As long as we're able to tackle that question, that's cool with me. Sorry to divert
No, no
or
worries. You're fine. Yeah, we'll get to it. That's going to be our last question, and but yeah, the question now is, what is something that you wish someone had prepared you for, but that no one did, or what is some advice you were never given that you wish someone shared with you?
well, so I know that Daniel's thinking about it, and so I'll just hop in and say, um, I made a joke about the research methods class, right? And I was like, what is a research method? That is the one thing that I really wish I had someone in my corner to help prepare me. There was an assumption by the faculty who was teaching that class that everyone there knew what research methods were. And so I was that first gen, really terrified student in the back of the class who did not raise my hand to ask questions because I thought they were dumb or right that imposter syndrome was there. And so it took me a lot of extra time reading those highly academic books with a lot of language that I did not understand about research methods and frameworks and data collection and all of that stuff. It's also just not the kind of learner that I am. So it took me twice as long. I would sometimes stay up until 12 or 1 studying these books to try to understand what these research methods were. And I know that there are research methods classes on campus now for undergraduate students. And I know that those are really critical as well. But yeah, that was the one piece for me is how do I write a master's thesis? Like where do I start? It took a little bit of time for me.
And for me, kind of along the same lines. So um, most social work programs, they're called generalist programs, but you basically learn um, like intermediate level material for all the different aspects of social work. So it could be clinical work like therapy, policy advocacy, and different areas. So I'd say for me, and most social work programs also don't require a psychology background, which I didn't have. So that was probably the area that I wish I would have done some more preparation before starting the program because I had to do a lot of catching up on just basic, developmental models, different theories in psychology about how the mind works and effective therapies. And they teach you that in an appropriate way, but it's all kind of compressed into a really short span of time. And I just found myself wishing I had more time before joining the program to do my own work on that.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Nettie. Before we end the presentation, we have one last question. And the last question is, grad school sounds so overwhelming. Why was it worth it for both of you?
That's a good question. So for me, I've had an interesting journey in jobs. Before I applied to the MSW program, I was actually a covert surveillance operative for the FBI, spying on people and upholding racial profiling, which was one of the reasons why I left that work. But it going through this program has helped me kind of reconnect to what I think is my purpose in life. Like I mentioned to y'all before, I've been through a lot of traumatic experiences and the school of hard knocks, and I think it's worth it because when I finish this, I'm going to have the educational credentials that will allow me to explore new career opportunities that are more in line with my own self purpose and passions in life.
Thank you, Daniel. How about you, Nettie?
Yeah, I know we're at 2 o'clock, so thanks for sticking around for an extra couple minutes. But yeah, I just wanted to make sure we answer that question to say yes, absolutely worth it. It was very overwhelming and very intense and hard, and a lot. And I'll just, just really quickly share that I graduated from grad school. I spent 1 semester teaching for the department that I graduated from, and then I moved to Colorado. When I moved to Colorado, I applied for a job working as an educator that works with high school students on healthy relationships and dating. I was one of 80 applicants for that job, and the person who hired me told me that it was my background in gender studies that made me that was like put me in a top tier of the applicant pool. It was that sort of perspective is what they were looking for. That job led me to coordinating that program, which led me to landing teaching gig here at MSU Denver, which led me into my job as associate director as Gita for Gita. So there's like a very clear pathway from my graduate experience to where I am now in a director position. And I'm incredibly grateful that I did not psych myself out in not applying for grad school, because I don't know where I would be now, right? And it was very much kind of in line with where I was meant to be in the movement. So it's worth it. Absolutely worth it. And Daniel, thank you so much for sharing. And I'm really excited about hearing updates on where you also go from here. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Nettie. Thank you for sharing your experience, your stories. We really appreciate you, and uh, it's just been a blast learning from both of you. Thank you, everybody, for coming in today to Grad School Stories. We have, 2 weeks of grad school events coming up, and tomorrow we have one from 1:30 to 2:30 with Sam Raw and Dr. Sophia Tran. So, come by tomorrow. These days are going to be happening every single day, or these have these types of events are going to be happening every single day. So, uh, yeah, thank you all for coming. Have a good one.
Bye, everyone. I have to go to a meeting, Jose, but great job. Thank you so much for moderating.
Thank you for having me again.
Yeah.
I'll see you Wednesday.
Okay, see you Wednesday.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Actually, I'm going to take a picture of this. Okay, for real this time. Bye, everyone.